All right. How are we on the sound on the tape, Carl? Are we good to go? All right. Who'd like to volunteer to pray for us as we start tonight? Okay, thanks.
Lord, we just want to thank you for promises, your faithfulness. And Lord, that you help us to learn and remember the things that we're studying. God, overall, that you would prepare us deeper than the language for what you have us here for, what you prepare us for. Still working on us. You be exalted in everything we do tonight and tomorrow. On. You show up, Jesus.
All right, you done already?
Yes.
Let me see that thing. Let's see how you did. No guess, huh? Okay, we are on page 70 in our textbook. Hebrew pronouns. All right, beginning top of the page. A pronoun is a word that replaces a noun. The noun that a pronoun refers back to is called the antecedent. So this is just basic grammar, right? English examples of pronouns would be he, she, it. That's third person. Second person is you. In English, you stands for both genders. And you could see even all three genders if you know he, she, it, masculine, feminine, neuter. And singular and plural. First person is I or we. Singular, plural. Those are personal pronouns. There are various kinds of other pronouns. Relative pronoun. The man who brought the cake is awesome. Right? So who is in that context a relative pronoun. Who in English also could be an interrogative pronoun. Who is the man who brought the cake? So those are really two different words, aren't they? Who is a relative pronoun. Who as an interrogative pronoun. So Hebrew pronouns, we get to look at those, and that's pretty exciting. Antecedent. You understand the term antecedent, right? If a pronoun takes the place of a noun, someplace in the context it should make clear the noun that the pronoun is taking the place of. The man who brought the cake is awesome. So what's the antecedent of who in that sentence? Man. Right? All right then. Paragraph 8.2, independent personal pronouns. In Hebrew, the independent personal pronoun is labeled independent because it stands alone and is not prefixed or suffixed to another word. Now, at the top of the page there, you have a listing of those. All right. These are always used as the subject of the sentence and never the object. We have a couple of cases in English, the subjective case and the objective case. Did you know that? Now, most words in English do not have case form distinctions. Some do, though. If I want to use the first person personal pronoun as a subject of a sentence, I will say, I like Hebrew. I, right? But that also has an objective case, that word I. What's the objective form of the word I? Me. Hebrew has been very good to me. Right? So me would be used in an objective case in that sentence, or as a direct object, Bob hit me. You see. Now you'll forever know how to use who and whom after tonight. You ever get confused about who and whom? Who is in a subjective case in English. So if you're using it as the subject of a sentence, you use who. Whom is in the objective case, so if it's not the subject of the sentence, then it gets to be whom. So, to whom were you talking? All right? Because whom is not the subject of the sentence. Who is the man who brought the cake? You see, because who is the subject of the sentence. So you can ask yourself, is it subject? Then it's who. If it's not, then it's whom. So now you know how to use who and whom. Well, in Hebrew, these independent personal pronouns only function as the subject of the sentence, not an object. We'll have other forms for doing that. So here are the forms on the top of page 71, and you can see in the table that he gives, of course, singular on the left, plural on the right. And we have first, second, and third person, masculine and feminine. Now, the very first one is first person common. Now, why do they use the term common? Well, it's not because the forms happen a lot or something like that. It's that the masculine and feminine have the same form. They hold it in common. So, masculine and feminine have a common form. So there isn't a distinction between the form of the masculine and feminine in the first person in these personal pronouns. So the first common forms are ani and alternately anoki, or anoki, really. Ani and anoki. Okay, let's do the singular. The second masculine is ata, you. There you go then. Oh, no. Sorry. I know. The second feminine form is at. Third masculine is who. And the third feminine is he or heave. Now, it's kind of odd, isn't it? Because in the pronouns, the masculine form is taking the ending, which we're used to seeing in nouns, for the feminine form. So it's kind of reversed here. Now, before you raise your fist and say, why are they so inconsistent? In English, what makes a noun plural, simplistically? Add an S. What makes a verb plural? Let's say it the other way. What makes a verb singular? What makes a verb singular? Plural. The boys hit the noun. All right? So, boys, S, plural. Verb, no S, plural. So, in English, an S on a verb makes it singular. Right? No, running, that doesn't make it plural. That makes it a gerund in English, or a participle. Right. Bob finds, with an S, Bob finds a lot of pennies. Right? Sharp lookers, plural, find a lot of pennies. So find is plural, finds with an S is singular. So you get a swapping of nouns in English, S making them plural, verbs in English, S making them singular. Well, here we kind of have a similar thing happening. So notice that ata, with a feminine-looking form, if you're thinking about nouns, is actually the masculine form. All right, then the plural, the first common form is anachnu, And the second masculine form is tem. And the second feminine form is tena. Third masculine is haim or hema. And the third feminine is hain or hena. Now, remember this pattern in the second person. For the masculine, you end up with a mame in the form. Mame for masculine. Right? And you end up with a noon in the form for the feminine. And that's true of the second person here, that's true of the third person here, isn't it? So it's going to be, in the plural, it's going to be characteristic for us to see a mame in the masculine form and a noon in the feminine form. Okay? All right. Now, notice, interestingly, that in Hebrew, he means she. Yeah. He means she. So, who is he? And he is she. And ma is what? Who is he? And he is she. And ma is what? So remember that little ditty, and I hope you. Who is he?
It's so unconfusing.
Who is he? And he is she. And ma is what? All right, so those are independent personal pronouns. The use of the independent personal pronouns. Independent personal pronouns and their translation should be memorized as vocabulary. Hebrew personal pronouns often occur in conjunction with verbs. Now, if you're going to memorize something as vocabulary, what does that mean? You ought to be able to see it on a page or on a board and be able to tell the meaning of it. All right, so you ought to be able to see ata with an olive and know that that means, oh, you, that's you, masculine. Right? Or you should be able to see anachnu and know, oh, that's we. All right? So learning that as vocabulary. Hebrew personal pronouns often occur in conjunction with verbs. They may also be used, however, in a predicate relationship with nouns or adjectives in verbless clauses. The following examples illustrate how the independent personal pronouns are used with other nouns or adjectives. So, ani, I, and then Adonai, the name Yahweh. You see how there's no verb expressed there, right? But it's in predicate relationship. Predicate means basically what? Verb, right? So then you can translate that. I am Yahweh. Okay. Hu Navi Sadiq. Who is he? And he is she. And ma is what? So who? He is a righteous prophet. Now notice, remember we learned the adjective comes after the noun. In English it's going to come before the noun typically, right? So I just have to reverse that in my translation. You are a good king. We are brothers. Notice, brothers can come first in the construction, so the pronoun can come second. All right. He is she. She is a wise woman. And Tem, you are in, notice the bait for the preposition, right? Its ear means city. Bait, preposition on front of it. You are in the great city. Now, does ear have a direct, I keep saying direct. Does ear have a definite article on it? Are you sure? The comments is indication of the definite article on ear. Normally, the bait would have what under it? Shiva. But it lengthens because the hey drops out. Remember, whenever you have a preposition stuck to the front of a word and a direct... I wish I could get that out of my head. And a definite article. A preposition and a definite article, both of those consonants aren't going to show up. In other words, the hey of the definite article drops out, and you just have vowel changing. We know there has to be a definite article on that because when you have a definite adjective modifying a noun, the noun also has to be definite, right? We definitely have a definite article on gadol, right? Hagadola, see it? Hagadola, ha, that's the direct definite, the definite article.
Instead of gadol, it's gadola. Is that because it's a feminine noun?
Yep, because ear is an irregular sort of feminine noun. That's right. Yeah, and that's a good indication that ear is feminine as city. But it is not ear-ra like we might normally expect. Okay, good observation.
Does that mean two? Doesn't that mean two with words? No.
What?
The gadol.
No.
No.
No, the hey on the end of that is a feminine ending matching the feminine nature of ear for city. So you are in the great city. So that's not a direction hey. Yeah, well, it's got to be feminine to match up with ear. And it would make sense. You are in the great. You are in toward the great city. I mean, you wouldn't need both of those. I mean, he's our in is different than going towards, right? So that wouldn't make sense together. Okay. So the ending looks the same, doesn't it? So that's kind of good to remember that. There are a few different reasons you can have that kind of a comments hey ending. And we went over that. I know it's hard to remember all of these different things, but remember on page 65, there are 3 reasons why you're going to have a comments hey ending, at least. All right, good. In terms of normal word order and verbless clause, the independent personal pronoun may precede or follow the noun or adjective. As with the predicate use of the adjective, a form of the verb to be in the present tense must be supplied. Okay, so that's personal pronouns. Of course, well, this he shows you them used in the predicate position, but you can just have these used as a subject in a whole sentence, right? I did this or that or whatever. All right, 8.5, demonstrative pronouns and adjectives. English demonstratives are this, these, that, and those. Remember what the Greek demonstratives are? Hutos and akena. This and these, that's singular and plural of the near demonstrative pronoun. This, these, and that, those is the singular and plural of the far demonstrative pronoun. See the difference? Near demonstrative, far demonstrative pronoun. All right. Demonstratives increase the level of a word's specificity beyond just that of the definite article. All right. So here are the forms. Here's the paradigm for the demonstrative pronoun in Hebrew, paragraph 8.6. Zeh means this, masculine. Zot means this, feminine. Now, the vocabulary form of this is going to be zeh. The vocabulary form is typically, in words where that applies, masculine singular, right? So it isn't very much of a stretch to remember if zeh is this masculine, zot is this feminine, because that looks a little bit like a feminine ending, doesn't it? All right. And then a couple of forms that we're familiar with, who and he. So context is going to tell you whether who means he and or that, or he means she or that. You see, so you're going to have to rely on context for that. Two forms doing double duty at that point. All right. In the plural, ele means these, and ele means these in the feminine as well. So that form is really the same in the masculine and feminine. All right. And the masculine and feminine for those is haim or hema, or hain or hena. We keep seeing in the plural again the mame in the masculine form and the noon in the feminine form, don't we? That's going to be a pretty consistent pattern. So bear that in mind. All right. Ela is going to be the vocabulary form as well for these. Ela, these. All right. So notice the examples he gives down here, the ambiguity. Hu ha'ish could either be he is the man, if it's a personal pronoun, or that is the man. And just with that limited amount of context, really no context, you really can't tell which it is, can you? And he ha'isha is going to be either she is the woman or that is the woman. All right. He gives you down there some variant or alternate forms, but they're very infrequent, so we're not going to worry too much about them. All right. The use of Hebrew demonstratives. You have demonstrative adjectives. If I have ha'ish, hazeh, that means this man. Now, notice that the demonstrative will agree with the noun that it modifies in gender, number, and definiteness. So you see that zeh, which is the demonstrative pronoun, has a definite article on it. Why does it have a definite article on it? Because ha'ish has a definite article. Now, you could have ish zeh, and it could mean this man too. All right. Ha-isha hazot, this woman. Ha-ish ha-hu, that man. Ha-ish ha-he, that woman. Ha-anashim ha-eleh, these men. Ha-noshim ha-eleh, these women. And it said, well, go ahead and say them all. Ha-anashim ha-hem, those men. And ha-nashim ha-hena, those women. So you can see how that works. If a modifying adjective is introduced, he says it is placed between the noun and the demonstrative adjective. You must also agree in gender, number, and definiteness. So, ha'ish, hatov, hazeh, this good man. All right, so this follows the same pattern as the adjectives.
Do the say rulers, they're also following, do they say that they always follow the noun?
Well, like adjectives, they would typically follow the noun. There's always a possibility of, exceptions to the rule.
But if it does come to the front, but if the pronoun precedes them.
Well, then you have a different relation, and we're going to talk about that.
Oh, okay.
But this is we're talking about demonstrative adjectives here.
So they will.
Remember, adjectives can work attributively or predicatively, right? So we got the good man, or the man is good. So if they do not agree in definiteness, then you have the man is good. Right? All right, demonstrative pronouns, when a Hebrew demonstrative is functioning as a pronoun, it will precede the noun and agree in gender and number, but not definiteness. Okay? So now we have Zeh Ha'ish. That means this is the man. So that, in other words, that's in predicate relation. So again, that rule follows. If the noun has a definite article and the modifier does not, you have predicate relationship. All right? And that's what you have here. And the demonstrative is going to come before the noun in this case. All right? When a modifying adjective is introduced, it is placed after the noun it modifies. It will agree in gender, number, and definiteness with the noun that is modifying. So I can have Zeh, Ha'ish, Hatov. So I can take the Zeh off, and I have Ha'ish, Hatov, and that just means the good man. When I add the Zeh, it's simply this is the good man. Or I could take Tov off, and I have this is the man. Okay, any questions about that so far?
Do they have a word like they mean in Greek to be, but just like in Greek it can be inferred like this?
It can be left out. In fact, if it's there, it's probably there for emphasis, just like in Greek. Yeah. And that would be the word Haya, the verb of be.
Oh, yeah.
And we've seen it, in fact, we were talking about Vayehi, which is a form of that. Did you get a chance to ask your other teacher how they would pronounce Vayehi or Vayhi in modern Hebrew?
No, but I will. We didn't have class.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
I'll ask him.
Yeah. All right, relative pronouns. In English, who, that, or which. You might want to stand up and cheer, but the relative pronoun is not declined in Hebrew, so we only have one form, asher, which means who, that, or which. So you see in the examples, ha'et, the tree, asher, which, batok, hagan, the tree which is in the middle of the garden. That's fairly straightforward, isn't it? Asher is a relative pronoun. Any questions on that? You understand that? As we go along, now we're getting all kinds of new forms and things like that, and now you're probably struggling less with some of the initial things that we had, right? That were just huge. Okay, we're going backwards. That's freaking me out, right? You're probably not so worried about going backwards anymore. Is that right? That's not such a big issue. The alphabet's okay for you pretty much now, right? And we're learning to pronounce. Now we're getting a barrage of forms. And it's just a matter of working these forms in. Remember we talked about learning these things. You're not going to look at it and just have them all at once. Remember how we talked about the fact that you're going to have to go through a process of forgetting these several times before you have them? There's a lot of this I'm still forgetting, which is really cool because that means I'm one step closer to at least having it longer, if not forever, right? Forget and then remember again, and that's the process that we're going through. So that's why, hopefully, you'll be able to learn these things and have them in your head. We all know that you're going to get all this stuff in your head, and you're going to be ready for the final. It's going to be like, don't touch me unless you jog something and it fall out of my mind. And you're going to take the final. And we know that's not all in long-term memory. But even the final is part of that process of getting it there. So we keep reviewing, and it's going to take us 2 courses to finish this grammar, right? And the course after that is a Hebrew reading course. So you're just going to do a whole lot of reading. And, in that course, that's time to go back and review and, remember forms. That's a very smart way to do it because, the reading is it becomes an important, that's what we're after, right? To be able to translate and read. And so to learn to do that is good. But that's the process where you start seeing these forms, right? And you start remembering them and using them. So, but in use and seeing them, it'll help you remember them. So, yeah, you just have to kind of gut it out and do some initial memorization of these things and get familiar with them. But they just need to work them in over time, right? And then you'll get more and more familiar with them. So, it's overwhelming, but you're not expected to have these in permanent long-term memory, in a week, right? By next week, it's like, okay, I got those down, never have to worry about that again. This is just all a process of going back, and you'll probably have this, by the time you get through your Hebrew studies in seminary, you'll probably have this worn out for referring to it. And I'm sure you'll take this with you to class when you're in your reading class, and you're looking at forms and, what's this, which is another reason why if you're doing this with somebody else, it's really helpful. Because there's a chance that if you have forgotten what a form is, your study partner will have remembered what the form was. And that can help you and be a point of working on the memorization of it without having to spend an hour looking for the grammar until you find out what it is. Now, that hour you spend looking through the grammar and finding out what it is useful. For one thing, it motivates you to try harder to remember it, so you don't have to keep doing that. But you probably also see some things when you're looking in there that you get jogged on your memory too. So that's useful too. But if you can do it with another person, that's very helpful. That's at all possible. All right. Relative pronoun. At least that one's fairly straightforward. That's really just a vocabulary issue entirely. All right. Interrogative pronouns. Here is the ma, what. We also have me, who. So me is who and ma is what. These pronouns do not inflect, which means you have to memorize forms. That's good, and can appear with or without the makaf. What's the makaf? Okay, it's the horizontal dash on the upper part of the line that connects two words together. All right.
Doesn't change the pronunciation. Doesn't change the inflection.
Well, what a makaf does is it makes the two words one accentual unit. So those two connected by a makaf are one unit from the standpoint of accent. But other than that, it doesn't change the pronunciation of it.
Are they transliterated together or separated? That's that important.
Well, you probably transliterate it with a dash between them, I suppose. All right, so you can see ma you sometimes have different vowel changes, but ma shemo, what is his name? And what's the word for name? Shame. And what's this O thing doing on there? Shemo name. What's that O doing on there? Yeah, that's where we're getting his here, which anticipates the next chapter, right? But that's what's happening there. Remember, we're sticking stuff onto words like crazy, right? This chapter is all about the independent pronouns, right? Now, when we get to the pronouns that get to stick on the end of words in the next chapter, they're called Hebrew pronominal suffixes. And that's just what that is right there, a pronominal suffix. And it's translated his. All right. Meh. Asita. What have you done? That's a verb. Asita. No makaf here. Ma. Ha-halom. Hazeh. Ha-halom. Hazeh. What is this dream? And then me ata, who are you? Me haish hazeh, who is this man? See how that's working? And me ha-anashim ha-ele, who are these men? All right, so that's the interrogative pronouns, me and ma. All right, we have an...
Why is there no makaf in who are these men when they're
And because you can have it or not.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, then why is it there in the first place?
Just get to do it if you want to.
Depends on which scribe it says.
Yeah, well, you know,
Just a point of clarification.
it's optional.
On the who is this man, you've got the Hayish, Hazah, or Hazeh.
Mm-hmm.
The ha, the definite article,
Mm-hmm.
is that there on both of those just to connect them?
Well, they have to agree in definiteness.
Right.
So if you're going to have ha'ish, you have to have hazeh.
Right, but
If you didn't have the article on zeh, you'd want to say this is the man. So that wouldn't work very well with me. Who is this is the man?
right, but I mean, why wouldn't it be dropped out for both of them? If Zed is this and Ish is man, then why is it definite article on both?
And that's just increasing the definiteness.
I didn't know if you had to have it in order to connect those two together so that you know what this was connected to, or if it was just the way that it's done.
No, I think it's just the way it's done.
Okay.
And but it does connect them and show you the relationship. It shows you have an attributive kind of relationship. This man.
If you had, would it make sense if those were dropped off and be translated differently, or would it just not even?
Well, in English, it would come across as probably the same. Because this man is this man.
That's fine. I was just
Yeah.
trying to clarify.
I suppose. No, I don't really know what, because Zeh is still going to make it definite. This man, but maybe the definiteness is emphasized with the article or whatever. But if it's there in one, it has to be there in both
Right.
to be in the
And you
attributive
didn't know
position.
if it was possible if it would make sense in Hebrew if it was gone from both.
I believe it would, yeah. But if it's gone, it's got to be gone in both. Yep. All right, now we have the interrogative particle, ha. In addition to the interrogative pronouns above, Hebrew also has an interrogative particle. In Hebrew, questions are not created with punctuation as in English. Rather, the interrogative clause or clauses, sentences asking a question, are created with the use of certain interrogative pronouns, or with a form of the particle ha prefixed to the first word of the sentence. Consider the following example. Shalach hamelech et hanavi. The king sent the prophet. Now, shalach means sent, of course. Notice that the verb comes first, just like we've seen in the Hebrew text when we've looked at it. The verb comes first and the subject comes second. All right, so the king sent the prophet. Now we have ha at the beginning of the sentence. Now, a verb is not going to take... some verbal forms could take a definite article, but a finite verb, is not going to take a definite article. Okay, so we're not going to confuse this with the definite article, because a definite article is not going to be on a finite verb. Shalach is a finite verb. It's a kind of a vocabulary issue. When you learn that vocabulary, you'll know that. So when you see ha on the front of it, now there aren't going to be that many interrogative particles compared to the absence of the interrogative particles, right? So, it's the kind of thing where you're going along and you go, what in the world is that? You have to think about it for a minute. But then, hopefully you'll remember, interrogative pronoun. Why is there a definite article, you might think, on that verb? Well, it's not a definite article. It doesn't have a doggish forte in the next letter. That clues you, right? Also, the vowel points under it are different, although the vowel points under the definite article can change for various reasons, right? But there isn't a good reason for it to change there. Right? So that would be the interrogative particle. So ha shalach hamelech et hanavi would mean, did the king send the prophet? Got to turn that into the question. Instead of the king did send the prophet. In English, we got to do something with the word order. Take that helping verb and put it forward. Did the king send the prophet? Right? Okay, so we're just going, like crazy through all kinds of pronouns here. Right? Yes?
Do they have a difference between send and sent then, or is that the only difference? I mean, that hey there changes it to a question.
Right.
But like we say, the king sent, or did the king send? Do they have a difference in the word?
Well, no, it's exactly the same right there. It's just in English, you just have to use a little bit different form to make it work in a question.
You could say the king did send the prophet.
Yeah. Well, the sent is, the vocabulary form is send, and we want to make it past tense. And that's exactly right. So you can make it past tense several ways, depending on what kind of past tense you want. But the simple way to make it past tense is turn it to sent, or you can use a helping verb to turn send into past tense. Did send, just like you said. Yeah. So if you, and in fact I once translated this in that way, the king did send the prophet. If you translate it that way, then I'm just moving the did forward to make it a question in English. So it's he's kind of toying with this a little bit with the English right there. But no, you can see in Hebrew the verb is spelled exactly the same. But fortunately, we don't have to worry about verbs for the rest of the whole term, basically. So that's pretty awesome.
So this one little prefix where we get where, when, how, why as well, or?
Well, there are other interrogative pronouns and other words that mean those things. Here, we're just saying either the king did send the prophet or did the king send the prophet. Now, we'll see in vocabulary, you could say, why did the king send the prophet? But that little hey doesn't say why, or where did the king send the prophet? It doesn't give you that much. It just turns the verb into a question verb, basically. So it goes from sent to did he send. He sent to did he send. Yes.
Well, I was just thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to understand this.
I'll be glad to.
If we were going to use something like where did the king send the prophet, you could also use the word where, but not in question. That is where the king sent the prophet, meaning a specific place. And one of the big differences is the question mark there.
Well, instead of the interrogative particle, you would have another interrogative, just like we have in English, interrogatives. And it's not dissimilar, because we can say, we can just change the order of the verb and make it a question. Did the king send the prophet? That made it a question in English. Or I could put another word on there, where? And I have my 5 interrogatives, right? Who, what, when, where, why? So who doesn't work in that, I don't think. Who did the king send the prophet? But where did the king send the prophet? Why did the king send the prophet? When did the king send the prophet? And all those. So those are all separate vocabulary words that you're going to put on there. And you're going to put those on probably instead of the interrogative hey. And in fact, when we get to vocabulary, we're going to see some of those. I'm trying to remember.
If you had the sentence, where did the king send the prophet, the word would be apo, would still have the interrogative part.
I don't think so.
It'd just be apo, king. You would drop that if you were writing and reading, it would just say apo.
I believe so.
So the other interrogatives will take the place of.
Yeah, because once you have that interrogative there, it's a question.
Yeah.
So this hey is just there to say, hey, this is a question. Hey, this is a question. Hey, this is a question. Okay. Now, a little above the middle of page 76. Distinguishing this from an article. Prefix to most consonants, it is ha, as in the example above. Prefix to a guttural consonant or any consonant with shava, it is normally ha. So if we had that situation with an article, we'd probably have a comets there, wouldn't we? Right? Prefix to a guttural consonant followed by comets, the spelling of the particle is he. So we're getting some kind of typical vowel point changing. But remember, we're starting from someplace different. We're not starting from a patak, we're starting from a reduced patak. Right? And so the change is a little different than it would be with the article. All right. If you're saying them, they sound alike, though, don't they? All right. Possibility of confusion between the two. Number one, the interrogative particle does not normally have an associated dogish forte, as does the definite article. With some frequency, the interrogative particle will be prefixed to a verbal form or another particle. Verbs and particles, of course, will not take the definite article. Did you know particles can't take an article? There you go, then. And the chatef patak of the interrogative particle, as it appears with most consonants, is not the spelling of the definite article. Well, we knew that. All right, think you're going to become a detailed person? All right. Questions about these things? What else are you going to do? It's raining a lot outside. You just got to curl up by the fireplace and take a chapter like this, and just spend some time with it and get to know these things. Right? All right, vocabulary on page 78. Say the word after me, please. Oh, hell. 10. Well, I guess there's a good way to remember that. But too bad it's not a better word than tent for that, You can think of a better word than tent to correspond to that. Yeah. So there you go. That'll be an easy one. Achar. Another. Well, what do you always want another of, Tim? What do you always want another of?
Good car.
You want another car. I want a car. You always want a car, right? I want another car. Especially men. We're never happy with what we have for very long. So that keeps Tim in business. That's good. All right. Ache. How? That's an interrogative. How? When you get old, you have the odd ache, and you wonder how did I get that ache? Now, if you're young, you have to figure out a different way of memorizing that because you can't relate to that. That's okay. Elef. 1,000, or tribe, or clan. Tribe of elves. Asher. What kind of pronoun is that? No, it's not interrogative. It's a relative pronoun, that's right. Who, which, that. Now, this isn't who with a question mark. We're going to come to that. That's me down there. I mean, not me, but me. This is who without the question mark, interrogative or relative pronoun. The man who brought the cake. See, there's no question there, right? Now I could say, who brought the cake? Or who is the man who brought the cake? But that's a different use of who. That's a little bit like who and he being used two different ways that we just saw in this chapter, right? As the personal pronoun and demonstrative. All right. Bahema. Cattle, animals. That's fairly easy to remember, right? Because you know a word that's a little bit like that from the Bible, right? Huh? Behemoth, right? The big guy, right? Well, his name is related to this word, right? Bahema, cattle, animals. Gam, also, indeed, dam, blood. I think I told you how my Hebrew professor remembered that word. Shakespeare, oh damn spot, trying to wash the blood off. There you go. But when you're going to be a pastor, you get to say hell and stuff like that. I mean, it's small reward, but you can do that. Is that tape on? I need more light in here. I should have that little lamp right here so I can see. Anybody else having trouble seeing these things in here? I got to get down on the lower part of my lenses here. Of course, we talked about the interrogative particle. Tahor, clean, pure. Ka'asher, as or when. Now, you see what's happened there? We had ka as a preposition, and we had asher as a relative pronoun, and now we put those two together, and we get something new, as or when. Ki, because, for, that. You see that one a lot of times, don't you? 4,487 times. So, that's worth remembering. Kasil, stupid, dull. Lama, also is lama. That's why. There's your interrogative, right? Madua, wherefore or why. You see that furtive patak there with the guttural ayin? Hua.
Did you skip what, how?
Oh, I guess I might have. Yeah, ma is what, how. Me is who. So you could say who is he and he is she and me is who and ma is what? Who is he and he is she and me is who and ma is what? Yeah, it sounds like who's on first? Ani, poor, afflicted. Shemen, oil. And shofet, judge. All right, so there you go. Hebrew pronouns. Questions on chapter 8? It's a big one, isn't it? Probably uncharacteristically big. But I'm sure not the only big chapter we'll come to.
Chapter 9 is pretty big.
Yeah, chapter 9. But the further on you go, all of a sudden, you're sticking with some patterns. And so now we're getting into some things that, are the first time we're seeing certain patterns. Pretty soon we're going to see these patterns again and again with slight variations or whatever. And so we're going to go, oh, that's like this, that's like that, right? Same as we saw when we did Greek. Remember that? You start seeing these patterns develop and it gets easier. So, in some sense, as we go down the line, in some sense, I just have that much more to remember, so that's hard. But the patterns are developing, so that makes it a bit easier. Right? You can probably see some patterns developing here, right? In relation to what we just saw over there. All right. So Hebrew pronominal suffixes. So now we are sticking things onto the end of words. A suffix goes on the end of a word, and a prefix goes on the beginning of a word. You could have an infix. I think that's not what he calls them here. What's he call them? No, forgot what he calls them, but we'll get to that. So these pronominal suffixes obviously stick to the end of a word. Nouns and other kinds of words. So here are the forms of these suffixes. we have a first common singular. And notice how it's not unusual for the first person to have the same form for the masculine and the feminine. So first common singular, first common plural. Right? We're going to see that again and again and again in these forms. So the first person form is E with a hierarchy yod. Second masculine singular is ka, final kaf, with that kametz in the middle of it there. The second feminine singular is ka, just with the final, did I say kametz? I did say kametz on the kaf, and the kaf with the shavah at the end, right? And then you have the third masculine singular, which is O, the holam vav, and then we have the third feminine singular, which is ah. But here we get that happy dot in there to show us that it is the pronominal suffix and not just a feminine ending, right? All right.
That'll always be it.
Mm-hmm. In this ending, yeah. First common plural, nu. Second masculine plural, kem. Second feminine plural, ken. Third masculine plural, hem. Third feminine plural, hen. Now, notice the pattern that we're seeing. The mame is in the masculine forms, remember that? And the noon is in the feminine forms. The kaf is in the second person, and the hey is in the third person. That's going to be a pattern that we're going to see again and again. So you can compare that with the endings of these pronouns that we saw on page 71. You see, and we can look at the plural, and we can see we don't have a kaf there, but we do have the mame in the masculine, the nu in the feminine. But in the third person, we have the hey, which is characteristic of the third person, right? See that? So pick up on those patterns. That's going to help you. We're going to find a similar pattern happening when we come to verb endings, right? So that's going to help us. Second person, third person, masculine, feminine. All right. Type 1 suffixes, type 2 suffixes. There's kind of another way to look at this if you want to, and that is type 1 suffixes are suffixes that go on to singular nouns, and type 2 suffixes are what the suffix looks like on a plural noun. All right? And in some sense, you could almost look at it in the masculine like you have a combination here of the plural ending and the pronominal suffix. You'll see what I mean in a minute. But we'll just think of it as type 1 and type 2 suffixes. It's really the same thing, isn't it? With a vowel and a yod stuck to the beginning of the ending. I always love that, the beginning of the ending. Right? So you have some sort of vowel and a yod put onto the beginning of the ending, or put between the end of the stem and the pronominal suffix. Right? As soon as we turn the page, the light will shine, and this will become a lot more clear.
These are just endings.
These are endings. That's right. Remember we saw the O ending a little while ago when I told you about that? Well, there it is, the third masculine singular. Right? Just stuck to the end of that word. All right? Now, notes on pronominal suffixes. You need to read through that. I always assume that you have carefully read through the chapters before class, right? So you really need to have done that. In fact, I might quiz you on that at some point and just say, for 10 points, did you read these chapters, yes or no? So you always have to read the chapters before class so that you know where we're going and those kinds of things. So before class, you're carefully reading it. You don't have to memorize all the forms and stuff at that point. But after class, now you're going back and picking out the stuff that you need to know, because you'll know what you need to know after we've gone through it, right? and memorizing it and doing that sort of thing. So you must read it ahead of time. All right. At the bottom of this page, 82, he's giving you some alternate forms which you need to pay attention to, but I don't worry about memorizing them. All right. Now, page 83, we're going to apply this, and this should help your understanding. All right. Sus. Am I still in the frame here? All right. Sus means horse, right? So if I put susi, if I put the e pronominal suffix on the end of it, then I have my horse. Of course, in English, that takes two words. In Hebrew, it's only one word. It's one word with the pronominal suffix. So susi means my horse. Suseka means your horse. Suseka means your horse. Susek means your horse, but the your is feminine. So if I'm talking to a man, I would use suseka, and if I'm talking to a woman, I use susek. Suso is his horse, and susa is her horse. Now, I think it's fair to say that you will see the first common singular ending and the third masculine singular ending the most. My God, his, whatever, right? So those are the ones you're going to see most. But those are the forms of all of them, and you'll see all of them from time to time. All right? Now, in this case, sus is singular. And those ones we just went through, those suffixes are also singular. All right? My, that's singular. Horse, that's singular. Okay? In this whole left-hand column, horse is always singular. But on the bottom part, the pronominal suffix is plural. So now, susenu means our horse. Now, whose horse is it? Ours. That's plural. How many horses are there? One. Okay, so suseken is your horse. Suseken, see we have ken and ken here, right? Suseken is your horse if your is a bunch of women or girls. Susam is their horse, and Susan is their horse. But there's a distinction between masculine and feminine. Well, there's not in English, right?
Now, I'm assuming that this language works like most, so if the group contains male and female, you use the male?
Yes, that would be it. Because like we said before, the masculine would serve as the generic kind of a thing. Yeah. Yeah, good question. Excellent. All right. Now, what happens if you have more than one horse? Well, you have to use the type 2 suffixes. So I can have my horses, the my part singular, right? But horses is plural. So susai, suseka, susaic, susaiv, and susepa. His horses, her horses. Now, the pronominal suffix is singular, but horses is plural. See how that works? So you see the point I'm trying to make is that they don't both have to be singular or both have to be plural. They could be, but one could be singular and one could be plural, and they could swap, back and forth in this way. All right? Susenu, susekem, suseken, susehen, and susehen, your horses and their horses.
So at this point where the horses were standing alone, there was no my, then horses would have that plural
Susim.
So we're just dropping that completely
Instead
off.
That's right. Instead of having the susim, you get the type 2 endings. So in a sense, the meme has dropped off. You're left with the yod and a different kind of vowel pointing, maybe. So the yod is there of the plural ending. You could think of it that way. The meme drops out to make room for the pronominal suffix. So the pronominal suffixes, type 1 and type 2, in terms of just the pronominal suffix meaning, there's no difference in meaning. Where it makes a difference in meaning is when you use the type 2 suffixes, you do that because the noun is plural. So in a sense, it indicates a difference in the meaning of the noun. Instead of horse, it's horses if you use the type 2 pronominal suffix. Right? Yes.
How would you, maybe, I hope I'm not jumping ahead. If I think of this as like, instead of horses, houses, and you're going to have a preposition in the house, or in the, how would you do that in our house? Would you just add it on?
Yeah, just add the
What's
preposition.
the order of which one gets added on first?
Well, the preposition gets added on the back. The preposition gets added on the front of the word. This pronominal suffix just gets added on the back. So
when you start adding things on both sides, like in the house,
Well, then you could add the you could have the bale of hay is in the horse, right? The bale of hay is in my horse. So you could have basusi with a bay and a cheval, that's in my horse. I don't know that you'd put a definite article on that, because my horse makes it definite anyway, right? But if you were going to put the definite article with it, it would be basusi. So you can just keep adding stuff.
Do you have in the house and in the house? So the phrase, it's dirty outside and dirty, and in the house. I don't know. I'm sure that's all one word, though.
Well, yeah, and in the house is all one word. Well, and in my house or our house.
So it'd be avant de by.
Something like that.
Avant de by. Or just bay by.
Well,
With lots of dots.
That's the solution to everything.
by it's weird because it's got the diphthong and it does different things with the vowel point. So I can't do it off the top of my
Say
head.
by? Would you say it twice? Or would you just say bay by?
Probably by it. Okay, but I don't really know for sure.
Or zay by?
Where are you getting the zay?
Well, he said this. If you want this is.
Oh, yeah, but that'd be a separate word. Zay.
Yeah.
You can put a McCafe on it if you want it. You could make it one accentual unit if you wanted.
Okay.
Well, the good thing is we just have to be able to recognize this again, right? If you had to create it, then it'd be tough. Tim having to speak it, he gets challenged by that. But
It's a lot easier to speak than it is to read.
Is it? You're not learning to read it? Well, you learn to read it here, but you're not learning to read it in your other... Or write? You're not learning to write it?
Not yet.
Yeah. That'd be the tough part. Learning to write it and having to know all of the different vowel points and all that kind of stuff. All right. Make sure you go over the notes on the masculine nouns with pronominal suffixes very carefully. Then we have feminine nouns with pronominal suffixes. Okay. And if you look on the top of page 85, you'll see what's happening here is you have the word is what? Torah. And the word by itself ends in a hey, doesn't it? The word by itself ends in a comet's hey. Right? Well, with feminine nouns, typically what happens is the hey turns to a tav. So we have torati. That's just easier to say, I guess, and sounds better than torahi. Torati, so the hey of the feminine noun turns to a tav, and you can see that all the way down through here, right? And you have the same endings just added to that. Self-same endings. Okay? When you get to the plural, in the feminine, you retain the plural ending. To wrote, and you use the type 2 suffixes. So you almost get a double plural thing going here, right? To-ratai, my laws. To-roteka, your laws. Okay, so you see how that works form-wise?
The suffixes change, or it is the same, it's just the noun that changes its spelling when combined with the feminine.
Yeah, in the masculine plural form changes because you drop out the main. In the feminine, the plural form stays the same and just adds the type 2 endings. Remember, the type 2 are the ones always used on the plural. Okay, so in the masculine, it's the plural that changes, in the feminine, it's the singular that changes, and the singular only changes the he to a tav. Right? Now, if we had to write this, we'd be going nuts, right? But this really is not going to be that difficult to recognize. When you're in your biblical text, again, the first common singular, maybe the plural too, but the first common singular and the third masculine singular are the ones you're going to see most of the time. So if you see to, ro, tai, you're probably not going to struggle too much with understanding that that's my laws. Right? Or if you see to, ro, tive, or to, ra, to, his law or his laws. So it's not going to be that difficult in terms of recognition, really, in the text. All right. Any other questions about that? Now, it looks like a lot, doesn't it? I'm feeling that you think this is looking like a lot. But it really isn't as much as you think it is.
Oh.
Well, it isn't. It's not. And the reason it isn't, because you come back here and notice in the first chapter, much of what we looked at are vocabulary issues. Right? And once you learn the basic endings, or once you get familiar with those basic pronominal endings, or the way they're formed, not just endings, but the whole pronoun right there, on page 71, and you get familiar with that, the rest of them are, fairly similar. It's not that tough, right? So, you're really basically dealing with a vocabulary issue. Again, once you memorize these endings on page 81, and we do need to just memorize these endings, memorize the type 1 endings, right? Just flat out, memorize the type 1 endings on page 81. Everybody has to get that message now, right? That left-hand row of endings, we need to just memorize those. That's going to help us when we come to the verb anyway, because the verb endings are going to be real similar to that, right? The type 2 endings, if you want to memorize those, that would be great, but I think you can do pretty well just realizing, I'm putting a yod on the beginning of that, and there's some vowel point stuff that happens. So there's a vowel point issue and a yod that goes on the type 1 endings. When I see that, I've got a type 2 ending. So that's not that tough to deal with, right? So to memorize e, kak, o, nu, kem, kin, ha, hem, hen, is not tremendously difficult. When you get to blank, ta, ti, u, ten, nu, as the perfect verb endings, it follows this pattern a little bit, right? So it's going to help you having known these. See what I mean? So once you remember that group of endings right there, you can deal with the type 2 thing, I think, real easily, don't you think? Now, you see sus and those endings, it's not going to throw you. You see sus seka, you're going to go, okay, I know the vocabulary is sus, and I know ka is my second masculine singular ending. Well, what's that yod doing in there? Well, immediately I'll know that's a type 2 ending. It means sus is plural. It's horses. Your horses. So it's not as difficult as it seems. All right. Kind of a good thing to remember that in the masculine plural, the name drops out. Really, the ending drops off, and you add those type 2 endings. But essentially, what's happened is the name has dropped out, and you have some vowel point stuff going on, right? And to remember, in the feminine, the hey just turns to a tav. You can think of the hey, being just too weak a letter to hang stuff on, right? If you're going to hang pictures on the wall, you want to try to find a stud. The hey is not a stud. The tav is a stud. Everybody would recognize the tav as a stud, all right? The hey is just too weak a letter. It's just, you can't hang stuff on it, right? So tav, that's a good strong letter. You can hang stuff there. So that's pretty much a piece of cake. All right. Page 86, monosyllabic syllabic nouns and pronominal suffixes. All right, there are a number of high-frequency monosyllabic nouns. What's a monosyllabic noun? Okay, it's a noun with one syllable. Now we got to do a little Latin here just to get this, get to Hebrew. I guess that's Greek, isn't it? Monosyllabic. Anyway, all right, there are a number of high-frequency monosyllabic nouns that will add yod to their stem before a pronominal suffix. This occurs only when the noun is singular. As you will observe from the following paradigms, the addition of this yod to singular nouns with type 1 suffixes may cause them to be confused with the plural nouns having type 2 suffixes. Heaven forbid. With regard to consonants, both paradigms are identical. The singular noun paradigm, however, has heroic yod throughout. So, for example, ak as brother gets akika, so that's singular. The plural noun paradigm varies in its vowel, but never has heroic yod. Akeka. All right. Recognizing this distinction now will prevent confusion later. The singular ak and its plural akim are presented below in type 1 and type 2 suffixes. All right. So you get aki, akika, akik, akiv, etc. Akai, akeka. Archaic. So notice how you get those typical type 2 strange vowel points. With the type 2, you get just a heroic yod consistently with a type 1. Now, being sloppy with this stuff, it doesn't mean you can go off and apply to be a Bible translator, right? But if you mess this up, you haven't really sent anybody to hell. You've made it brothers instead of brother, right? You see what I mean? So, that doesn't make you fit to, to be on the committee to translate the next, latest and greatest translation of the Bible, right? So here's where in Hebrew you have to kind of relax a little bit, right? We're inundated with details as small as vowel points, right? You just have to relax and get some experience. If we were going to learn Hebrew, essentially from our experience in this text and just, raw brain power, just remembering all this stuff, that'd be a misery, wouldn't it? But what we will do is we will get into the Hebrew Bible, and we all like reading the Bible, right? Especially in the original language. And then we just kind of flow with it and learn, while we're reading the Bible in its original language. And then it's fun. So, will we make mistakes? Will we, not get everything perfectly right all the time? Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, we have to kind of allow ourselves not to live up to our doctrine of inspiration and inerrancy a little bit. You see what I mean? In other words, we need to be humble about it and not go off to our church thinking, yes, I am Bible translator qualified now. Let's change this doctrine because I've seen it in the original text. We're not there yet, right? And that's okay because we've only been doing this how many weeks? I'm not quite ready to apply to be on a translation committee myself. Not for Hebrew at least. I'm not ready to change any doctrines based on my reading of the Hebrew text all by myself, right? So we can relax about it a little bit, and from where you're feeling right now to where you'll be in 6 months, you'll probably surprise yourself at how much of the stuff you'll actually have available to you. All right. Now we have another issue or two to deal with before we finish this chapter. And that is prepositions with pronominal suffixes. So now we get to have prepositions. Remember we had prepositions? What's a preposition? Anywhere a squirrel can go, right? In, at, by, under, around, through, those kinds of words. So now we get to hook prepositions and pronominal suffixes together. That's pretty exciting, isn't it? All right. So in our example of type 1. Now, Here's the thing with prepositions. Prepositions are not really singular or plural, aren't they? Are they? They're just prepositions. Is in singular or plural? Well, it doesn't apply to that, right? Prepositions, some of them take type 1 endings, and some of them take type 2 endings. Why? Because they can, right? It's one of those things where, it must sound better to do it this way, so we do it this way. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change. At this point, there is no issue of singularity or plurality, because with prepositions, that's not part of the package, right? You understand what I'm saying? At this point, it just becomes an issue of form. That's the way you spell it. Why is night spelled Knight? I don't know. It just is. And I have a few phone numbers to know, so I'm not going to worry about why at that point. All right? So that's just the way these are. But we already know the endings. See, and this is the great thing. I'm creating whole new words here, right? But I already know the vocabulary, and I already know the endings, so it's a piece of cake. I don't have to worry about it. All right? So I know la is to, so li is to me. See this stuff all the time in the Bible. So this the great thing about this is knowing this, you're going to use this. This is something you're going to use. All right? Laka to you. Lak to you. Lo to him. La to her. Lanu to us. Lakem to you, etc. If you have the preposition all, now we get the type 2 endings. Alai, on me. Aleka, on you, etc. Right? That's fairly straightforward, isn't it? Now the prepositions kaf and min with pronominal suffixes. Once you see this, you're not going to really have any problem with it. Now imagine if you were going to have to write Hebrew. Go write a story in Hebrew. You'd be driven nuts looking this stuff up. Every word you'd have to look up. How's it spelled? What's the vowel point like? And blah blah blah. You'd go crazy, wouldn't you? But once you see this, it's not going to be that tough to remember it. So when you're having a pronominal ending or suffix onto the preposition ka, like or as, you end up adding a mame in there, right? So you have kamoni. So you're adding this moan thing, right, in the middle of that. So kamoni is simply the preposition ka, like, with the e, me, ending on it. But if you just put ki, there's another vocabulary word like that, isn't there? All right? So we don't want to confuse that. So kamoni, kamoka, etc. Is kaf with the pronominal suffix added. When you get to the plural, it's just kakem, kaken, kahen, kahen, kahem, kahen. All right? So there you go. Min adds a mame in a lot of them as well. Mimeni, mimka, mimek, mimenu, etc. So once you see that and realize what's going on, that's not too tough to deal with, right? There really is precious little here that we're having to actually memorize. You understand that, right? I mean, this is a lot less memorization than we had in Greek, isn't it? How many forms of the relative pronoun are there? So many you can't even count them, or it'll take a while to count them. How many do we have in Hebrew? 1. Piece of cake. Read those notes on these because you'll need to know that stuff. All right. Remember the definite direct object marker that we have? We saw that in Genesis chapter 1. Spelled a lot like the preposition. Et and eight. The object marker, 8 without the makef and et with the makef, takes type 1 pronominal suffixes. It is translated as a personal pronoun in the objective or accusative case. Now, remember we said these pronouns over from chapter 8 that stand on their own, can only be used as in a subjective sort of case. as the subject of the sentence. I did this, you did this, he, she, it did this, right? Well, if you want to use it as an object, somebody hit me, what you would use is the definite direct object marker and these pronominal endings. Okay? And you can see them there listed down in the middle of that page 90, paragraph 914. All right. Be careful not to confuse the object marker with the preposition spelled the same, meaning with. While sharing the same lexical form, these two words can be distinguished by their vowels after pronominal suffix have been added. The object marker is distinguished by a holum vowel over the initial consonant. It is a sagol in the 2MP and the 2MFP forms. The preposition is distinguished by the presence of the heroic vowel under the initial consonant. The preposition also has a doggish forte in the tom. These are important distinctions to remember. Both paradigms are listed below for comparison. All right. So the with, you can kind of remember that because with in English has an I, and that vowel under the aleph there is an I-class vowel, isn't it? The heroic. All right. So OT is me, like he hit me, objective, right? You notice that me is not I, because I is subjective in English. Me is objective in English. Right? So OT, me, OTEKA, you, OTAK, you, etc. With a preposition, it's iti with me, iteka with you, etc. So you see that distinction? Now, in the context, if I had Bob hit something, it's probably not going to be Bob hit with me. Bob hit me. So the context is going to go a long ways in terms of leading you in the direction that you need to go with this, even if you can't remember the exact form of it. Right? If I said, I went to the store with Sam, well, I went to the store Sam, it's not going to fit, is it? I went with Sam. I hit Bob. So the nature of the verb and the context and all that kind of stuff is going to do a lot to move you in the right direction with these things. But, having seen it on the page, now you're responsible for it on the final. No, I'm teasing. Just a little tension breaker there, that's all. There's not any tension, is there? All right. Can you stand one more thing? All right. The difference between eem and and this is easy because it's just a vocabulary issue. Eem means with, and means people. Well, when you put the pronominal suffixes on them, they simply retain those same vowels under the initial consonant. So, Emi is with me, Ami is my people. And you can imagine, you do see things like my people once in a while in the Bible, right? So that's a word or a combination that you're going to see. And obviously prepositions are probably among the words that are most common as well. So you can see the distinction there. That's actually a fairly easy one. That's just a vocabulary issue there, isn't it? Right? Just pay attention to the vowel pointing. And notice the difference between eem as the preposition and as the people of God. And if you have to use the word Amish, who are people, to remember this, you could be forgiven. Right? People. All right, now, just to make everything feel right, we'll do a little vocabulary, and that will be it. All right, say it after me. Page 93. O. Or. Sorry. Well, they're almost the same word, aren't they? Or. Well, O doesn't have a resh on it, but O and or. All right. Ayin. There is not. there are not. You can also see it as ain. And if you have to use the word ain't, just don't tell anybody. Just keep it private at work. Right? Off, nostril, nose, anger, or aphayim, because we have two of them. That's dual. Boker. Now, see how easy this is? We already know what that is, right? We've seen it already, right? That means morning. Yeah, Boker Tov. We saw that in Genesis 1, right? Evening and morning. Bakar. Cows, herds, cattle. Bakar. What do you have to do in the morning? Boker, milkbee, bakar. Makes me wonder if there isn't that kind of connection with those words in reality. I don't know whether there is or not. But barakah, blessing. Blessing, the noun form. That's the noun form of blessing. Hain, behold. And here's one that's used a lot, over 1,000 times in the Old Testament. Hine, behold or lo. Chatat, sin. No comments about sin being feminine here. Quiescent olive, by the way. You see that there. Yesh. There is. There are. Now that's kind of positive, isn't it? Almost sounds like yes, doesn't it? Yesh. There is. There are. Kavod. Glory. Honor. The word kavod, or the root kavad, actually has an essential meaning of heavy or important. Almost like they used to say, "That's heavy, man." Important. Ichabod Crane, Kavod, right? Ichabod means glory departed, right? So Ichabod, I guess that means he's had better days. Ichabod, kavod, meaning glory or honor. Kali, vessel or utensil. Lechem, bread or food. Now, that's pretty easy to remember. Why? Yeah, Beit Lachem means what? House of bread. Beit Lachem. So you'll never miss the vocabulary word Lachem ever again, will you? And you'll know that Beit is not by it. Why? Because Beit's a construct form. Someday we'll learn about constructs. House of construct, house of bread. See. All right. Levade, alone or beside. Mishpacha, family or clan.